The cold, sterile walls of the alien ship reflected the dull lights that flickered above, casting shadows across the room where a lone human sat. His hands were bound by metal cuffs, the cold chains biting into his skin, but his mind was alive, with defiance. He was a soldier, a warrior, and he had been captured. But he wasn't just any human. The arrogance of his captor would be her downfall. The ship's interior was nothing like anything he had seen before, sleek and polished, with strange symbols etched into the walls. It felt like a prison for both his body and his mind. He had no idea how long it had been since they had brought him aboard. Hours? Days? Time was meaningless in the stillness of this place. He had been taken after a brutal fight, knocked out cold before he could put up a real defense. They had underestimated him just as they underestimated all humans. The door slid open, and the heavy sound of footsteps echoed in the silent room. He looked up, meeting the eyes of his captor. She was an alien, tall and imposing, with dark, shimmering skin that seemed to absorb the light around her. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, full of power and pride. She was beautiful, but it was the kind of beauty that made him want to break her. There was something about her superiority that gnawed at him. She was everything he hated. She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate step, she approached him, her voice smooth and taunting. "I have to admit, I expected more from a human. But you're just like the rest. Weak, helpless." She chuckled softly, her voice laced with mockery. "I'm curious, though. How long do you think you'll last before you beg for mercy?" He didn't respond. He knew it was pointless to answer her words. Instead, he studied her, every movement, every gesture, memorizing her actions. She stood tall, confident, as though she believed she was untouchable. But she was wrong. That belief would be shattered. The alien circled around him, her eyes never leaving his. She was testing him, poking him with her words, trying to provoke him. She was used to getting what she wanted. No one had ever dared to defy her. And yet here he was, silent, refusing to break under her gaze. She paused in front of him, smirking. "You're probably wondering why you're here, why we're keeping you alive. It's simple, really. You're an experiment. It's nothing more than a specimen for our amusement." Her words hung in the air, cold and final. He could feel his anger bubbling beneath the surface. He was no specimen. He was a soldier, a fighter, and he would not be treated like this. He had been captured, yes, but he wasn't defeated. Not yet, not ever. The alien's lips curled into a cruel smile as she stepped closer, her eyes glinting with a strange mixture of amusement and arrogance. She reached down and poked his chest, a light, playful jab. The touch was meant to belittle him, to show her power, but to him, it was a challenge. His muscles tensed. Every part of him screamed to fight back, to show her that he was more than she could ever understand, but he held back. He wasn't going to make it easy for her. He wasn't going to let her see how much her taunting hurt. The alien poked him again, this time harder. The sharp jab sent a jolt through his chest, but he stayed still, his gaze never leaving hers. She laughed, a soft melodic sound that filled the room. You could have made this easier on yourself, but you're so stubborn, so proud. Just like all the other humans I've encountered. It's almost cute, in a way. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much her words got under his skin. He had dealt with worse. He'd been through more than she could ever imagine. His silence was his weapon, and he wasn't going to let her win. A moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the ship's engines. She stood before him, her gaze intense, studying him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Then, as if something inside her snapped, she reached down again, this time gripping his chin with her cold fingers and forcing him to look up at her. The touch sent a shiver down his spine, but he didn't flinch. He met her gaze head-on, unflinching, daring her to break him. "You think you're better than me?" He finally spoke, his voice low, but filled with quiet strength. "You think you can just poke and prod me until I break? Well, you're wrong." The alien's eyes widened slightly, as if surprised by the sudden change in his demeanor. She tilted her head, studying him for a moment longer. "Oh, you're not what I expected." She released her grip on his chin and stepped back, her eyes narrowing. I'll enjoy watching you suffer, human. You'll learn what it means to be nothing in my world. But the human soldier only smiled, a small, defiant smile. He was not broken. It wasn't going to be anyone's plaything. And the alien, arrogant as she was about to learn just how wrong she was about him. The silence in the room was thick, almost suffocating, as the alien stared down at the human with an air of superiority. The moment seemed to stretch on forever, each passing second a reminder of how out of place he felt in this alien world. Yet beneath the calm exterior, something burned in him, something she hadn't noticed yet. The alien took a step back, as though giving him space to breathe. But the distance between them didn't feel like freedom, it felt like the calm before the storm. She was giving him a false sense of security, letting him think he could get away with silence. And she couldn't have been more wrong. She paced in front of him like a predator circling her prey. The confidence in her every step echoed with the rhythm of her own arrogance. "No, I expected so much more from a human," she said, her voice smooth, almost playful. "Yet here you are, so docile, so defeated." Her words were like daggers, but the human refused to let them pierce his armor. He had heard worse before this. Alien was no different from any of his enemies. She could poke him with her words, with her taunts, but it wasn't going to make him crack. Not yet. Not ever. She leaned in closer, her face inches from his. He could feel the heat of her breath against his skin, sharp and cold, just like her eyes. She reached out, slowly, deliberately, poking him lightly in the chest once again. "Long do you think you can keep up this act, human? You're nothing here, just a pawn, a test subject." Her voice was soft but venomous, each word dripping with condescension. The human's fists clenched around the metal cuffs that bound him. He could feel the pressure building inside him. The anger, the humiliation, it was all simmering beneath the surface, ready to explode. This wasn't just a game for him anymore. This was a challenge. She had made the mistake of underestimating him. "Your people have a lot of things wrong, don't they?" The alien continued, stepping back. Slightly, a smirk playing on her lips as though she were speaking to a child. "You're all the same, weak, defiant, and yet you think you can fight back." Her words were almost casual, as if she were talking about a trivial matter. The poke had now turned into a series of prodding jabs, each one more annoying than the last. He could feel the tension rising, his body screaming to lash out, to show her just how wrong she was. The alien's eyes gleamed with malicious delight as she continued to taunt him. She leaned in close once more, her face inches from his ear, and whispered, "You're not even worth the effort, human. I could crush you without even trying." That was it, the final straw. Her voice, her arrogance, everything about her was driving him to the edge. For the first time, he felt his restraint slip. A surge of raw anger coursed through him like electricity. And before he could stop it, he lunged forward, his teeth sinking into the alien's hand. The bite was sharp, a flash of defiance that surprised both of them. Alien gasped, stepping back in shock as she pulled her hand away, looking at him with a mix of disbelief and fury. The human, panting from the effort, locked eyes with her. The shock of what had just happened settled in, but there was no fear in his gaze, only a quiet, burning anger. He had shown her one thing. He wasn't going to just sit there and take it anymore. For a moment, the room was silent. The alien's hand throbbed with pain, but her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You dare to bite me?" she hissed, her voice low and filled with venom. The arrogance that had once radiated from her had been replaced by something else, a flicker of doubt, perhaps, even fear. And that was exactly what he wanted. "Let this be a lesson," the human growled, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You've underestimated me, and now you're going to regret it." The alien stared at him for a long moment, her lips curled into a thin, tight smile. "You think you've won?" she sneered. "You think that was some kind of victory? You're still nothing but a mere insect in my world." But the human didn't back down. He knew this was just the beginning. He had made his move. Step was hers. He had bitten her to show his dominance, but it was only a glimpse of the power he was about to unleash. The alien could poke and prod all she wanted, but she had opened a door that would never close. The hum of the ship's engines was now a distant background noise, barely noticeable compared to the tension that crackled in the air. The alien stood before the human, her hand still throbbing where he had bitten her. But now, there was something different in her eyes, something more cautious, more wary. For the first time since their encounter began, she wasn't so sure of herself. The human had made a choice. He'd shown her something she wasn't ready for: resistance. And in that single moment, the balance of power had shifted, at least in his mind. He could feel it deep within him. Wasn't just a prisoner anymore. No, he was something more. He was a force to be reckoned with. The alien's lips twitched in frustration as she backed away from him, her eyes scanning him with a cold calculation. The bite had shaken her, but she wasn't one to show weakness. She was an apex predator, invincible in her own mind. But she didn't realize that it wasn't her physical strength that would break her. It was her underestimation of the human spirit. The silence stretched on as she studied him from across the room, her thoughts clearly turning, calculating the next move. The human could feel the heat of her gaze, but he refused to flinch. He wasn't going to show any more signs of weakness. Not now. Not after everything he had endured. Her hand twitched again, and he could see her struggling to contain her fury. He could almost hear her mind working, weighing the consequences of how far she was willing to push him. And in that moment, something strange happened. The arrogance that had been so dominant in her before seemed to slip. Just a little. She was losing control. Without warning, the alien raised a hand, her fingers glowing with a soft, menacing light. A surge of energy rippled through the room, the air humming with raw power. She was testing him now, trying to provoke him into making another move. The human's body tensed, every muscle ready to react, but he stood still, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing him react. He could feel the energy in the air, the weight of it pressing down on him, but he wasn't afraid. This was what he had been waiting for. This was the moment where everything changed. "Go ahead," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do your worst." For a moment, the alien froze, her eyes narrowing. She hadn't expected him to speak with such certainty, to face her power with such quiet confidence. Now she was the one who was uncertain. The human's strength wasn't in his physical form, it was in his mind, his refusal to break. And that was something she had never encountered before. She clenched her fist, and the energy in the room pulsed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she growled. But despite the venom in her voice, something in her posture shifted. There was a momentary hesitation, a flicker of doubt. The human met her gaze, his eyes steady, unblinking. "I know exactly who you are, and I'm not afraid of you." The alien let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing in the room. "You should be," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. But even as she spoke, the tension between them grew thicker, the air crackling with the intensity of their standoff. She was pushing him, testing his resolve, but he was standing, firm, refusing to give in. Then, without warning, the alien made her move. She raised her hand, and this time the air around them shimmered with energy. But the human was ready. In one swift motion, he lunged forward, using his momentum to slam his body into hers, knocking her back. The energy she had summoned crackled harmlessly around him. Dissipating into the air, she stumbled, caught off guard by his sudden move. The human didn't stop there. He grabbed her arm and twisted it, forcing her to the ground with a force that took her by surprise. The arrogance that had once filled her every movement had evaporated, replaced by the cold sting of reality. The alien struggled beneath him, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. For the first time, she realized something she hadn't before. The human was not someone to be underestimated. He had no fear of her, no respect for her power. He was ready to fight to the end, and that alone made him dangerous. As the alien tried to break free, the human held her firmly, his body pressed against hers, his grip unrelenting. He leaned in close, his breath warm against her skin. "You think you can control me, but you can't," he whispered, his voice low and filled with quiet fury. "I will never bow to you." Her eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there now, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Respect? The alien didn't know. But she knew one thing for certain. The human had changed the game. And now, the true test of strength would begin. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as the human and alien faced off, their bodies taut with tension. The alien's pulse raced beneath her cool exterior, but the human, though fatigued from the struggle, was oddly calm. There was no trace of fear in his eyes, only focus, determination, and a defiance that made her nervous, something she wasn't used to feeling. He had already shown her that he could bite, that he could fight. What came next was the question she couldn't answer. The air crackled with the energy of their standoff. Every movement, every breath, felt like it might shatter the stillness, yet neither moved. The alien glared down at him, her lips drawn into a tight line, her mind calculating her next move. She had the power to crush him, to wipe away the insolence he had dared to display, but something held her back. His resolve was unnerving, like a calm before a storm. Without warning, the human broke the silence. His voice was a soft but firm murmur. "You think you can break me? But you're wrong. I'm not afraid of you. I never was." She stared at him, a mixture of disbelief and anger flashing across her face. How could this human, this insignificant being, stand there so confidently, as if the entire universe wasn't bent on his destruction? How dare he make such bold claims in the face of her power? And then, before she could react, the human made his move. It wasn't a physical attack, not immediately. Instead, it was an act of sheer mental willpower. In the blink of an eye, he shifted his stance, crouching low, his body brimming with latent energy, his eyes never leaving hers. It was as if he had unlocked some primal instinct, something deep inside of him that she had failed to understand. Then, just as quickly, he launched himself toward her. But not with the speed of a predator. No, it was the suddenness of a storm that caught her off guard. He had no weapon, no tools, but the sheer force of his will was his weapon. He grabbed her by the wrist hard, like a vice hand twisted, forcing her to bend back. For a brief moment, she was completely off balance, her strength suddenly meaningless against the unexpected ferocity of his grip. She gasped as his hold tightened. The shock on her face was evident. She had never been taken by surprise like this. In one swift motion, he yanked her forward, throwing her off her guard and onto the floor. Her breath caught in her throat as she landed hard on her back, a moment of vulnerability that she had never anticipated. The human stood over her, his chest rising and falling with exertion, but there was no triumph in his expression. He wasn't enjoying the victory. He wasn't even thinking of victory. No, this was something more. This was him showing her the true extent of his power. "You were right about one thing," he said, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. "I'm nothing like the others." The alien stared up at him, her heart racing, the blood pounding. In her ears, she had never been brought to this point, not by another creature, not even by her own kind. And yet here she was, lying on the cold floor, caught in the grip of a human who had refused to kneel, who had refused to bow, and who had just made her realize how deeply she had underestimated him. The human stepped back slowly, allowing her to rise. The gesture was not out of mercy. It was out of respect. Respect for her strength, respect for the fight he knew she would bring. But he knew, deep down, that she was no longer in control. He had shifted the game. Her face twisted with a mixture of anger and grudging admiration. She had miscalculated. For the first time since their meeting, she felt something she hadn't expected. Uncertainty. Was it fear? Or perhaps something far worse, respect? The alien stood slowly, her eyes never leaving his. The anger had not dissipated, but something else flickered behind her eyes now, a recognition of what he had just proven. She had poked, she had prodded, she had tried to break him, and now she was the one who was broken. Her mind raced. She was furious at her own weakness, but she couldn't deny that this human was different. "You think you've won?" she spat, her voice low, but tinged with something else. "You've only just begun to see what I'm capable of." The human's eyes flashed with understanding. "No, You've only just begun to see what I'm capable of." In that moment, the alien understood. The game had changed. And for the first time, she realized that perhaps it was she who was at a disadvantage now. He had made the first move, but this was just the beginning. The real battle was only just unfolding. And the human had already shown his hand. He was going to fight until the very end. The moment she regained her footing, the alien's calm demeanor shattered. Her posture was rigid, her breathing shallow, as the realization hit her like a wave. She had underestimated this human in a way she never should have. She had thought him weak, a mere insect to toy with, but he had proven her wrong in the most humiliating way possible. She stood there, eyes wide with fury, a deep, burning anger coursing through her veins. Her mind, usually so controlled, was now a storm of thoughts and emotions, none of them pleasant. She had expected to break him, to show him that his species was nothing compared to the power she commanded. Instead, he had flipped the script, and that, more than anything, enraged her. The alien's fingers clenched into fists, the glowing veins on her skin pulsing as her anger manifested in a deadly, tangible form. The temperature in the room seemed to rise, the air growing thicker. With each passing second, the hum of the ship's machinery faded into the background as a dangerous energy filled the space between them. "You think you can defy me?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was laced with an unmistakable venom. "You think you can just bite the hand that feeds you, that commands you?" The human stood his ground, eyes never leaving hers. His muscles were still tense from the struggle, but his expression was unreadable, calm, almost detached. He knew that she was angry, and that made her even more dangerous. But he wasn't going to let her intimidate him. Not now. "No, I don't think I can," he said, his voice steady, betraying no hint of fear. "I know I can." Her anger flared, and in an instant the temperature in the room shot up. The alien's body surged with energy, her power now crackling in the air like electricity. The walls seemed to vibrate as she raised her arms, her hands glowing with blinding intensity. It was a signal she was preparing to strike, but the human didn't flinch. He had seen power like this before, and it hadn't broken him. The alien's aura of superiority was nothing compared to the force of his will. Without warning, Alien hurled a blast of raw energy at him, a streak of blinding light that filled the room with an ear-splitting crack. It was so fast, so intense, that the human barely had time to react. But he didn't need to. With a swift movement, he dodged to the side, the energy blast missing him by mere inches. The impact hit the wall behind him, causing the ship's structure to shudder violently, but the human remained unharmed. He had seen the attack coming, anticipated it, and had moved faster than she expected. She was growing frustrated, now frustrated that she could not land a blow. Frustrated that he wasn't intimidated? For a moment, the alien paused, her chest rising and falling with the exertion. She had expected him to break under her power, to crumble like all the others who had challenged her, but instead he was still standing, unwavering. His defiance was like a dagger in her side, cutting deeper than any physical blow could. "I told you," the human said, stepping forward. "I'm not here to break." Her gaze locked with his, and in that instant something shifted in her. It wasn't fear. No, it was something far worse. It was a recognition of the truth that he was not like the others, the truth that he had something inside him that could never be subdued. She unleashed another barrage of energy, this time aiming directly for his chest. The human, his movements fluid and precise, jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. He was fast, faster than she had anticipated, and her attacks were no longer having the desired effect. Her anger was clouding her judgment, and for the first time, she realized that she was no longer in control. With each missed attack, the alien's frustration grew. She had fought countless beings across the galaxy, each one cowering before her power. But this human, this man was different. He was standing up to her in a way that no one had ever done before. "Why won't you just fall?" she screamed, her voice raw with emotion. "Why won't you bend to my will?" The human stood tall, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Defiance, yes, but also something deeper, something she hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. Respect. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a force, a challenge she hadn't expected. The alien didn't know how to handle it. "I'm not here to be your puppet," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You want me to bend? To submit? But that's not who I am." Her hands trembled, the glowing energy flickering out of control. The walls around them seemed to pulse with the intensity of the moment. She was losing herself, losing the composure that had always defined her. And it was all because of this human, this weak, insignificant human. But she wasn't done yet. No. The battle was far from over. The alien raised her arms once more, and this time the energy that surged through her wasn't just an attack. It was pure, unbridled rage. And in that moment, the human knew this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a battle for control, for dominance. And he wasn't about to lose it. Not now, not ever. The alien's fury burned brighter than ever, but the human was ready. The true fight had only just begun. The alien's rage still crackled in the air, her power building with each passing second. Her anger was like a tidal wave, and the human could feel its pull. But despite the overwhelming force she wielded, there was something different in the air now, something he hadn't anticipated. The alien's attacks were becoming more reckless, more frantic, and that gave him a sliver of hope. She was losing control, and that meant there was a chance for him to regain the upper hand. But before he could act, the unexpected happened. Strange, low hum reverberated through the ship, a sound that was neither human nor alien. The hum grew louder, a strange resonance that vibrated through the walls, the floor beneath him. The alien's eyes darted around, her power still swirling around her, but now tinged with confusion. The human had felt it too, the shift in the air, the sudden shift in energy. And then, from the shadows of the room, something emerged. At first, it was a flicker, like a shadow in the corner of his vision. But soon, it solidified into something Mara figure stepping into the light. Moving with a quiet grace that contrasted the chaos around them, the human's breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was a being unlike anything he had ever seen. The creature was tall, but its form was sleek and elegant, with features that were both alien and familiar. Its skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow, like liquid light in motion. It didn't belong to the same race as the alien who had captured him, but there was no mistaking the power in its presence. It exuded an aura of calm and undeniable force that balanced the frenzied energy of the alien behind him. The alien recoiled, her face twisted in disbelief. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and fear. "You're here?" "Right. But why? I thought you." The new figure didn't speak at first. Instead, it stepped forward, its movements fluid, each step deliberate, yet filled with purpose. Its gaze locked onto the human, a silent understanding passing between them. The human didn't know who or what this new ally was, but there was something about the being's presence that resonated with him, something that told him it was not here to fight him, it was here to help. With a calm that could only come from experience, the being turned its attention back to the alien. Its voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "Your reign is over. This human is not your plaything. He is more than you understand," the alien snarled, her power flaring again. "You're wrong. You've no idea what you're dealing with. This human has nothing. He's weak. He's nothing." But the being's eyes never left the alien. "You think power is strength? You think control is dominance?" It stepped closer, its voice becoming sharper, more commanding. "Become a slave to your own arrogance. This human will not bow. Neither will I." The alien's eyes flashed with fury as she lunged, her energy surging with deadly intent. But the being was faster, its movements graceful and quick, sidestepping her strike with ease. In one fluid motion, it extended its arm, and a wave of energy cascaded from its hand, not an attack, but a pulse of force that knocked the alien back, sending her crashing into the far wall with a deafening thud. For a moment the room was silent. The alien lay on the floor, stunned, the force of the attack having left her momentarily incapacitated. The human stood, eyes wide, his heart racing. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected help, not in the form of this being. The being turned to him, its eyes filled with understanding. "You were never meant to be alone," it said, its voice soft but firm. "We see potential in you, something others refuse to understand." The human's mind raced, struggling to make sense of everything that had just happened. Who were these beings? Why had they come? And why had they chosen to help him? But the answers weren't important right now. The alien was down, her fury momentarily stilled, and this was his chance. The human stepped forward, his voice steady, filled with newfound resolve. "I didn't ask for your help," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But I'll take it." The being nodded, its expression unreadable but filled with quiet approval. "You've earned it." Together, they turned back toward the fallen alien, who was slowly rising, her face a mask of rage. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think they can save you? I'll tear you both apart." The human's stance shifted, his body preparing for what was to come. "You've already lost," he said, his voice low but filled with certainty. "You've lost because you don't understand strength. You don't understand the true meaning of power." And as the alien prepared for her next strike, the human knew something she didn't. This battle wasn't about strength or power. It was about will. And the human would fight with everything he had to prove that no one, not even the strongest of enemies, could break him. The unexpected ally by his side was just the beginning. Now, with this new force in his corner, the true battle would unfold. And the alien, arrogant and furious, would soon learn what it meant to face true resistance. The air in the room was thick with the remnants of the battle, charged with the energy of the ongoing war. The alien, bruised and enraged, rose from the floor, her eyes burning with hatred. But the human and his newfound ally stood side by side, unyielding. The alien had underestimated them both, and now, with every moment that passed, she realized just how badly. Her power was still overwhelming, crackling around her like a storm ready to erupt. But something had shifted. She could feel it deep within herself, the fear of the unknown. The realization that she was no longer the apex predator in this fight. She had fought beings like him before, but none had ever shown such resilience, such refusal to bend, and it unnerved her. But she was still the alien, still the one with the strength, the one with control, or so she believed. The being beside the human stepped forward, its energy calm, focused, ready for whatever the alien would throw at them. "You will learn," it said, its voice low but unwavering. "The fight is not about power, it's about conviction, and yours is broken." The alien snarled, her hands crackling with energy. She was ready to end this, to crush them both. But the human didn't flinch. There was no fear left in him. His body was bruised, his energy drained, but the fire in his eyes, those fierce, unrelenting eyes, never wavered. "I'm done running," the human said, his voice steady, filled with the quiet strength of someone who had been tested beyond their limits. "This ends now." Without warning, the alien unleashed a blast of energy, a surge so powerful it seemed to split the very air in two. The ship trembled under the force, and the walls cracked, sending sparks flying into the air. The human didn't hesitate. With a single fluid motion, he pushed forward, using the last of his strength to dodge the blast and close the distance between them. The alien's eyes widened in disbelief as the human reached out, grabbing her by the wrist with a grip that was unyielding. Her energy crackled around him, but it was no longer enough to stop him. She struggled, trying to break free, but the human's resolve was stronger than her power. "Your strength doesn't matter," he said, his voice fierce. "It's your arrogance that will destroy you." In that moment, the alien knew. She had lost. Her power had failed her. The human had broken through her defenses, and now she was at his mercy. She had believed herself invincible, untouchable, but he had shattered that illusion. The being beside him stepped forward, its presence a calm force amidst the storm. With a simple gesture, it raised its hand, and the energy in the room shifted. The alien's attacks faltered, her power dimming under the weight of the truth that had just been laid bare. "You've underestimated the strength of will," the being said, its voice filled with quiet authority. "It is the one thing no power can control." The alien's face twisted in fury, but there was no escape now. The human had taken control of the fight, and he wasn't letting go. His grip on her wrist tightened, and with one final motion, he twisted her arm, sending her crashing to the floor in a final, crushing defeat. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The alien lay motionless on the ground, her strength gone, her arrogance broken. The human stood tall, breathing heavily, but standing firm. His ally, the mysterious being, watched over him, its presence a constant reminder that he was no longer alone. And then, as if the weight of everything that had just transpired hit her all at once, the alien spoke, her voice hoarse. "How?" she asked, her eyes filled with disbelief. "How did you do it?" The human looked down at her, his expression unreadable, but filled with a quiet certainty. "You were never my enemy," he said. "Your weakness was thinking you were invincible, and now you're learning that strength doesn't come from power. It comes from the will to fight when everything tells you to give up." The alien's gaze faltered, her defiance giving way to something new. Uncertainty. She had been defeated not by his strength, but by his will. No. And in that moment, she understood something she had never considered before: the true power of the human spirit. The being beside the human stepped forward, its eyes filled with silent approval. "The battle is over," it said. "But this is only the beginning." The alien, her pride shattered and her strength spent, had nothing left. She knew it was over. But as she lay there, defeated and broken, she couldn't help but feel something she had never known: respect. And so, the human and his ally stood victorious. Not because they had defeated the alien through brute force, but because they had shown her that true strength came from within. The alien had failed to break him, and in doing so, had proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the one that couldn't be seen, the will to keep fighting no matter the odds. The ship, once filled with the crackling energy of battle, now lay still. The storm had passed, and in the quiet aftermath, the human knew that this victory was only the first step. There was a galaxy of challenges ahead, but with his newfound ally at his side, he was ready to face them all. The final showdown had ended, but the war for the galaxy was just beginning.